All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'd like to lead a discussion about a cloud strategy that makes a significant difference in how you operate and manage your infrastructure across your entire IT landscape. So when it comes to cloud, if you think about it, the greatest business value would typically come from cloud-native software platforms, right? That's where businesses can get the most bang for their buck. But there's a small problem with that. Most organizations who are migrating to the cloud are just lifting and shifting their traditional workloads. They might have a couple of projects where they're refactoring or building from scratch new cloud systems. But in that lift and shift, there's a lot of cost just for migration. They typically think it's going to take a year or two, and it takes way longer, so they're running two platforms at the same time. And as we all know, there's a host of challenges in adopting the new cloud platform. This isn't like your typical, hey, we have an infrastructure, or we're going to get this new application, et cetera, and we're going to mix it into what we do. This is an entirely new platform, meaning that they always talk about, hey, you got to refactor your application. You got to refactor your infrastructure. You have to rebuild high availability. You have to rebuild backups. You have to rebuild disaster recovery and security. You have to retool for administration and support, for monitoring, and you have to train up on that. And with the skills gap problem, that's a really, really big issue, right? So I'd like to run a quick poll. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, but don't hurt yourself. Shoulder height I can see plenty well, right? But for business benefit, I'm going to classify it three ways: infrastructure, streamlining operations, and cloud-native software platform. So you can only vote for one. So how many think that infrastructure is the biggest bang for the buck for the business? How many would say streamlining operations? Okay, that's about half the room. And how many would say cloud-native software applications? Okay, great. That's fantastic. Did I miss anything? Should I have mentioned something else that somebody thinks is critical as part? DR? Gotcha. And I would put that either inside of streamlining operations or infrastructure, just for classification. But one thing I'd say about it, and what I'm going to talk about today, is that infrastructure side is typically ignored, and for a really good reason. Cloud, as a new strategy for an IT organization, comes down from on high. Either the board of an organization or its CEO or somebody at the top says, I want everything in our organization to be cloud. So when it comes down to IT, they have two distinct teams: application and infrastructure, right? And if you think about it, who has the ears of the decision makers in the organization? It's kind of obvious, right? The application folks do. Agreed? And so what are they going to say? Hey, we're all in. Everything should be there. No question. Let's go, right? Did anybody walk over here to the infrastructure guys and even just ask them, hey, is this a good idea? Yeah, see, I get this all the time. It's the same nod of heads. No. Why? First of all, the application guys are talking to those senior level folks about what they're going to do to grow their business, what new operations processes, how they're going to reach their customers, work with their vendors and their partners better. And that's, for me, why I say that the cloud-native platform is so important to the business, because they're developing applications on that do so much with the different services that are available and the speed at which they can develop. Let's take the infrastructure folks guys now. We know how senior leadership sees those guys, right? It's like this: oh my God, why are we paying all this money for this stuff? It doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't tie specifically to things that they know and understand. So it's a headache. So they're not going to ask them. In fact, they're thinking, great, I can get rid of my data center. Yeah, okay. It doesn't work so well, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How if you take a right approach, and it's not cloud as a destination, it's an operating model that you use across your landscape, you can actually facilitate a better effort, a better outcome, that's a better word, a better outcome with your software projects, okay? So we'll dig in, and I'm gonna be asking questions along the way, so please feel free to speak up. I'll do a pause about 3 to 5 seconds, and if I have to talk too much, I'll start asking questions. So this is the typical cloud journey. People say, hey, you know, I'm gonna take off and make this happen, the plan is set. It'll take a couple of years. I talked to a CIO who said exactly 90% in 2 years and we'll be done. The internal team can perform this, and this is the thing about these guys over here on the infrastructure side. They're like, oh, this is nothing. You guys can get this done. It's a whole new platform. Everything I talked about rebuilding goes on budget, on schedule, desired results. Well, since nobody talked to them and they had no time to plan, this is actually what it looks like. This is your typical cloud migration, right? You ever try and jump a pond? No, I'm not. It doesn't work. And for really good reason. They had no time to plan, no time to think about what they're moving, why they're moving it, when it really needs to be moved. When the guys at the top say it needs to be over there, people just start running. So there's great risk, falls short of expectations, loss of confidence, cost overruns, and the skills gap problem. I have the good fortune of doing CIO roundtables in the back of steakhouses, and I've had the whole evening taken up by people talking about skills gaps. It's huge. But I've got a really good example of this. I interviewed a CIO at a large financial institution, and he said exactly this: Jim, it's been over 3.5 years since I started a project that I told the executives would be 90% done in the cloud in 2 years. He said, I'm spending money like I never thought I would spend it. I'm only 28% of the way there, and I stopped the project. And that's not just one guy. I've heard this again and again and again. So anybody have similar experience? I've definitely seen some grins and nods. And anybody have similar challenges with this or different challenges that you want to share?
We do everything on Prem for that reason. Just trying to get the experience and see what in the next phase, I'll call it phase because we're not even there yet.
Yeah.
To see what it is that we can do based on the experience we've gathered while we did it internally. And there are things that are out in the cloud, but that's software driven. It's the vendor, Microsoft 365.
Right.
You know, the vendor is in the cloud.
Right.
Or they're migrating to the cloud and we're going with it.
Right.
But they're providing us a service.
Yep. And software as a service is a big thing, right? I mean, it's not only popular, but it makes a lot of sense.
But we're looking to do it eventually, but we're not. We're dipping our toe.
Dipping your toe in the water, right? Got it. Makes sense. So one of the biggest problems is that the perception of cloud is, and when I talk to people, it's these three things, right? It's AWS, it's Google, it's Azure. That's it. Wow, okay. That's not really cloud. I mean, there are a lot of other vendors providing a true VMware cloud platform that's a lot easier to move to when you're virtualized, which most people are, than it is to take and move over to a hyperscale platform. Even though you can move VMware over there, there's still a lot more work to rebuild the backups, DR, high availability, learn all the tools you need to run in that, as opposed to going a VMware platform where the tools are very, very similar to what you're accustomed to. And you can even run your own tools over there, or in most cases, organizations who have that kind of a platform will have the kind of services that you want. So if you want to take the headaches of backups or DR off somebody's back, you can make that happen, right? That's a lot different than when I still have to manage DR and backups in my legacy environment while I'm trying to migrate to a cloud environment, hyperscale, where I have to recreate those things. Take the time, find the resources, rebuild them from scratch, harden them so I can count on them, etc. It's very difficult. So what I like to talk about in this cloud is this particular slide is this is what they're pitching. cloud guys are pitching this, and the people who are listening to it who aren't the infrastructure folks are going, yeah, this is a great idea. We're going to rehost, we're going to lift and shift, we're going to refactor and modernize our platform. Boy, that sounds fantastic. And then we'll be cloud native re-architecting everything that we do. And people are all in, but what they're doing is they're doing mostly this. And the lift on this is why that guy only got to 28% in 3.5 years. Again, more head nods. Any comments, any thoughts? Anything. You can go anywhere with this. I'm wide open. So, because of what we've seen, even repatriation of environments back into their data centers, I think this is all high risk if you don't have the right approach. If you're not thinking about this and what does a cloud operating model really offer me? What am I really looking for? APIs, scalability, automation, this list goes on, and we'll talk about a couple of those things a little later. This is what marketing does. I wish they had a pair of special sunglasses that helped with the glare of the marketing that comes from those big boys, right? Because they've got people convinced. And when the guys at the top are convinced, everybody underneath has to go through what they have to go through. But an analyst firm produced a document that said that, and they're a global one, that organizations that pushed everything out there all at once are paying about 30% more year over year for their infrastructure. And you would think somebody in IT would get fired, but guess who ordered it? So they're paying it. So if you take a holistic approach, you want to look at this thing, across the timeline where you're talking about adoption for the whole thing, but you want to consider the whole environment. So you want to look at not cloud infrastructure management, but a cloud operating model. Again, it's not a destination. It's a way of doing things. I'm not saying anything different than anybody in infrastructure understands, which is a field I've been in for a very long time. They used to call it bimodal. IBM came out with this term a long time ago. Infrastructure side, application side. Application side, do things as fast as you can, right? And cloud native programming has accelerated that. Infrastructure side, we're like, oh, no. Take your time. We're impacting everybody and everything with the changes we make down here. Go slower. Even infrastructure has to speed up. But when we're not given any time, we can't do the kinds of things we want to do. And I'm going to talk about how you can actually slow down to speed up and get things done. So if I have all of these areas that I want to understand, so in other words, I'm trying to build a holistic environment, and I understand that cloud application management is about 30% of my concern relative to having things in hyperscale and having real benefit to the business. And that's always my goal, especially if I'm doing workshops with organizations. It's actually why I'm brought in, because people are looking at our solution and they want to know, really, how's it going to help us? I get it, it'll give us DR, but I've got these applications over here and these databases, and I'm running 180 offices. How do I line this up so I'm sure that I'm making a difference? So that's just a piece. I got my legacy workloads, managing data, software as a service systems. I need to better understand how I'm going to manage all that. That's where the risk is, just on the infrastructure side and making operations something that's more seamless. So it's not what they promoted, which is agility and value. It's more cost and complexity, period. End of story. I'm not making that up. You can see it everywhere that you read about what's going on out there and how people are experiencing what the journey's like. So an alternative, when you're being holistic, is to think of an in-between step on a platform that's cloud, that can provide as-a-service solutions, because if you're going to take on learning about what you're going to see here, which is getting all the way to cloud and retraining your people to get there, then you're going to want to have some time for them to reskill. In fact, in those conversations that we have about the skills gap, one of the most popular solutions to that is reskilling your internal resources. That's what works best. So if you can find an enterprise cloud service that is API driven, offers automation, provides the vCloud Director, which means that all your guys that are trained in virtual environments are going to be very familiar with what they're looking at. Extremely familiar. This is what allows you to then give more energy to this destination. And by the way, it won't all end up there. Gartner and everybody else saying, like, this isn't the end all for everything. Some people who really like cloud are saying that, yeah, that's it, that's where it's going. But in truth, what we're seeing now is that that's not, a lot can go there, but not everything belongs there, for sure. So you get all the features and then some, and again, I'll talk about that some more in a little bit, but I'm going to pause for a second to see anything that I've said whatsoever. Any questions on this? Again, you can even come from left field. I'm just interested in what people are thinking. I'm going to get a drink. This is a conversation. Nobody has any thoughts on this?
Can you explain a little more what you're calling co-location?
So edge is becoming obviously really big, and it's one of the final frontiers of moving, I would say, virtual and cloud services out to the front lines.
So is that like what Azure is doing? They gave it a name, I can't remember.
It is.
Where they're actually extending their cloud on-prem?
Correct. The only thing about AWS and Azure and what...
A name, I can't remember. It's a simple...
Yeah, I don't recall it off the top of my head either.
Amazon Outpost is theirs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge footprint. It's meant for large organizations because I think Azure's is like around $20,000 to $25,000 a month, and a lot of manufacturing companies are not,
Yeah, we didn't get to that part.
Yeah, right. So this talks about that combination I'm talking about. Here you have on-prem, existing skills, same app, no agility, large CapEx, manually driven, of course, new skill sets, app, and I love to emphasize this, infrastructure refactoring, because everybody ignores that, and it's the problem that people are running into. Agile and elastic, and enterprise cloud is your stepping stone. It's the bridge on the journey to this. And you're not going all the way. You're actually modernizing your systems and providing a lot more service, a lot more automation. You're doing all kinds of things with an approach like this that's going to save you time and money and allow you to reskill the resources that you have. Any questions on that?
Yeah, when you say modernized apps, are you talking about the SaaS-based applications or just taking your legacy application and rewriting?
Yeah, typically your traditional workloads. So not so much the SaaS systems as it would be those systems that, and case in point, that are still on-prem. A lot of people have started that journey and they've moved, I would say on average, somewhere between 8 and 15% of serious applications into the cloud, not including Office 365 and things like that as back office tools. Everybody's doing that, right?
We have quite a bit of legacy applications. We already moved some of them to because Office 365 easy. We do have some major other applications which we're actually going to do software as a service. So it already exists there.
Right.
We still have some of the application we can invest with it. So we are actually doing that hybrid kind of
Right.
approach.
Right. So basically a multi-cloud approach. And when I say multi-cloud, I include in it your on-prem and your edge systems.
Right, yeah. More towards the hyper-converged environment, the traditional three-tier.
Right.
Then,
Yep, gotcha. And again, from a business perspective, there's a lot of organizations who have traditional three-tier applications and they're doing the job. There's no reason for them to invest the time and money to make that migration unless there's a market threat, right? So if that's not there and they don't see it coming, because you can look for that, you know what market you're in, et cetera, There's a lot of organizations that don't have a good reason to do this, and yet in large organizations that might have a good reason to do it, they're still pushing everything up there all at once. And in those large environments, they have things that still don't need to go for 3, 5, or 5+ years.
Yeah, ours, we have pretty good reason to do that because the skill sets for us to get that success, they'll pretty much do most of the upgrades and all that, especially when it comes to application.
Right.
It's a huge thing for us doing that yearly.
Yes. So you're talking about just refreshes, or?
Yeah, it's like, some of the major applications that we have, the mentored actually we do it on the cloud.
Right. Yes. No, I know. Okay, I missed it. It's hard to hear you all the way up here, but gotcha. And yes, it's a total pain. I worked a number of years ago helping a large law firm, and boy, they'll hang on to that old version until they have to let it go because it's going out of service. In fact, I know one that's doing that right now.
From an infrastructure migration perspective, especially with the skill set, do people reduce that risk because they're looking more at the managed services type stuff and treating it more as a utility of, hey, electric's coming in the building, I don't need to worry about being an electrician. Compute tower, all I need is this compute tower. So what do they do from that skill set perspective, and are they reducing that risk? Just looking at other people managing it for them.
Right, so you mentioned migration. I want to make sure that we're not talking about migration, but just what it means to be there and the benefits you get once you've moved over there, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, because migration's a big challenge too, but yes, you know what? I'll put it on pause and then I'll come back to you when I hit another slide here. I'm going to talk right to it and then I'll find out if I'm covering the bases, okay? So this is kind of it, and it speaks a little bit to what you're talking about, but there's another slide that'll cover it better than this. You know, this is what executives see when they think cloud. Oh, easy button, out of the data center, into the cloud, woohoo. It's not like that, right? So when I show you what it means to really provide as a service for this, it goes into those spaces out around migration, multi-cloud tools, you know, providing a place that you can actually walk into and, you know, do your governance and compliance work, et cetera, auditing. So that's what people really want, but what does it look like? And the way we like to talk about it is order matters. How you do this and the order that you do it in is significant. How am I doing on time? Good. All right. So obviously, if I do these operations without the parentheses, I get a different number. A really different number sometimes. And if I go in and do that move, and I've talked to these guys but not talked to these guys, I'm missing a set of parentheses that are really, really important. So as an example, we moved an organization and they've been there for a few years now, and they were working on their project for 2 years before we got to them. You can see this online. It's University of Phoenix. It's on our YouTube channel. We moved 12,000 virtual machines, and as part of that, I think close to 2,000 were bare metal, into the cloud in 9 months. They had been working on it for more than 2 years. In other words, we got them off of that, and we saved them $26 million along the way. The total value is significant, and they retrained 50 people. It was like they estimated, and they made the estimate, not us, about 246,000 hours saved. And yes, because they use services, but I'm going to talk to that more in a second. So we can accelerate that journey because it's VMware to VMware Cloud. And we use a tool like Zerto, where we can set everything up. You can test the heck out of it. We're keeping it up to date. You can run it and make sure that it's ready to go, and then move it over. And if there's a problem, we can go back. Very rare. With that much testing, you don't run into that problem, and you can do this migration very quickly and very effectively. So we say, slow down to speed up. Crawl, walk, run. In other words, the slowing down here is using that bridge instead of trying to jump across the chasm to the other side. It just makes a lot of sense, like that guy who was trying to cross the creek early on. So I'll go through this kind of quickly. The characteristics of the infancy, primarily VMware, mostly internal workloads, fragmented, undefined skills gaps. Step 1, walk before you run. Let's get out onto a VMware platform that's going to give me automation, APIs, scalability, a lot of services that I can really use. And again, I'm going to expand on that in a minute. And now that I've dumped that here, I have much more time and energy to take this next step, which for the business is where they get all the value. It's just a no-brainer. That's what they want. That's what they're listening to. So if you're going to make that argument as the CIO, who knows that they know nothing about this and don't care and wish they could write a smaller check and think that that's the answer, this is a way to have a conversation with them about how to really make a difference with that, right? So those apps can stay there until they're ready to move, and now you're ready to go. Because from this environment, we're also providing multi-cloud tools and very, very low latency into the major hyperscalers and other providers. So there's a big advantage. You can upskill your staff, cloud native, et cetera. And at the end of the day, now, and this should actually come all the way over to here, but a lot of people are just trying to get out of their data center. We actually do data center buybacks. That's how much they're trying to get out of them, right? They just want to be done with them, and we lease it back to them. But the point here is that now you have an operating model functioning on this, and that's the next thing I'm going to talk about. We say it needs to be an and conversation. So if I look at this chart that has traditional VMware workloads, the cloud tools and services, right? I've plugged into machine learning and AI in the cloud before. I used to be a database guy. It's amazing compared to what it is when you have to create it yourself, right? This is really good stuff when it comes to building applications for the business. But the rest of this stuff is not something they do. So they have DR, data protection, desktop as a service, but it's not as a service. They're going to give you that, give me your credit card, tell me how much you want, build it, run it. They're not necessarily running it for you. And in the cases where they are, what I've heard directly from people doing it is that there's shortcomings. It's not as flexible as you need it, right? Over here, you have multi-cloud tools. So networking, monitoring, patching, security, cloud automation, and cost management. Something where you can manage cost from on-prem, that was over here, to this enterprise into the cloud. I can see cost when somebody in the business says, hey, I need these systems. I can see cost on-prem. I can see it in enterprise cloud. I can see it in the big three. I can see it at Google. I can see it at IBM. I have all those at my fingertips. And what's more, I can actually use that product as kind of, and this is a big problem for most organizations, a way to keep people from taking their credit card and going to buy something. Now they come through you. That application actually controls the purchasing of cloud resources in your organization, including setting budgets for the people that are allowed to purchase. And if they go over their budget, where does it go to get approval, et cetera. So these tools are meant to really support this new era that we're in on the infrastructure side. Enterprise cloud with the services that come with it means that you're filling in the gap. You've got nationwide co-location that you can go into, white glove service. That's not what you're going to get from the big boys unless you're spending a ton of money. Free technology assessments, no fee migration, simplification, and then multi-cloud for all these things. So my firewall can run in those places. I can do micro-segmentation in all those places, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, disaster recovery, backups. These tools are available. You don't have to use them at all. We call them Legos. Like, here, what do you want? We can snap these into place. We know they work together already because we use them, right? And our customers use them. So that's what a cloud operating model looks like. You're creating a strategy with anybody who offers these types of services, because you could get these services from a managed services organization and get your data center and these from somebody else and get this. The idea is to use a cloud operating model. That's what's going to give you the most bang for the buck. Any questions on anything I just said?
I'm not sure I understand.
She doesn't understand. Anybody else not understand? I can take that. I had a great security discussion once, and I was telling them about what it means to have somebody help you out so that you can do the work on the front lines, finding out where you're going to get attacked. And this guy's going, wait, I'm supposed to find out who's going to attack me and you want me to give you the keys? It was great. We had a great conversation. Anybody have any questions about what I said at all, anywhere? So,
is there anything that didn't make sense?
I'm going to get a drink of water.
Quick question. When you said that an enterprise cloud, are you talking about VMware vCloud?
Yeah, thank you. It's a term that we use. There are some other names that they give it, but it doesn't have the marketing shine that the big boys have. Any other questions? I'm gonna drink some more water. So I'm just gonna give a little bit more to make clear that I'm not just talking about stuff that's pie in the sky. There are tools that we provide that you can leverage to better understand what's going on in your environment, across your environment. I was around when VMware came out, when we were using bare metal, and I did grow up on a Xenix system doing C coding and Informix database systems. So I've seen a lot. And I can remember the day I worked an all-nighter and used vMotion to move an application, and then a week later used it to move a database without interrupting services. It was like, mind blown. Now it's like nothing, right? But there's new innovations today that are like that. And the thing is that when we did benchmarking of virtual systems or bare metal systems, on average, they were only being used 3 to 8% of their resources. That's really small. That was the average. And when it comes to virtual systems, you think, okay, great, we're going to get over 50% on this. No. For years after that, we would re-benchmark, and the average use was between 25 and 30%, and it was 35%. It was typically under 30. So really not using the resources. So obviously, cloud's big in that it provides that, and even the enterprise cloud provides you a pool of resources instead of you buying these chunks that you can use, right? And you can scale, and it makes life a lot easier, especially when it comes to refreshes and things like that. So understanding what's down there is really important. Making sure you do a deep dive. You're seeing where those systems are. You're seeing what systems have the peak and valleys. You understand the dependencies across the systems, right? Because some things are going to move to hyperscale, and some things aren't. That's so important. One of the things that bite people the most are the ingress and egress fees of hyperscale cloud. Any questions on any of that? So the tools that I talk about in doing that don't just operate when you're doing the assessment. They're a part of the platform in our environment. So you've got an ongoing view of where things are going. So somebody puts in the order and you say these things belong on hyperscale, and it's monitoring it, and then 6 months later it says, wow, look at what you're paying. And you could pay less if you moved it to Azure or Enterprise Cloud. So you can see that all the time, and that's one of the biggest factors. When I talk to CIOs, that's one of the challenges that they're ensuring that they tackle right now. So if you're in the middle of the journey or going to it, you want to do that, and having the ability to show back and charge back, that's really significant, because now you're talking to the executives about exactly where that money's going. That's something that's really significant. Then, of course, you can do that continuous optimization, and this is the automation part. So for deployments and right sizing and continuously monitoring, you can also automate those processes. So when somebody orders up something, depending on how often you get those types of orders, why not make it automatic? Why not make it something that when the order goes in, the system gets built, right? You can put a stop to it, so the order says, hey, this is going to be what's going to happen, and somebody looks at it and says, okay, good, now push the green button, etc. So there's all kinds of ways that you can handle that are really, really powerful. So you've got automation, standardization. See how I was combining two words. And you're doing exactly what cloud is supposed to provide the infrastructure team. A way to scale without those heavy refreshes, a way to have those true as a services, right? But with tools that work across the different platforms. Anybody familiar with the idea of a single pane of glass for managed services? That's what you're going to need as you go down the road on the entire IT landscape. You want as many of tools as you can to be in one place, and there's ways to get that information into a single pane of glass. That's another conversation. So I'll say it one more time. I'm going to get a drink of water. Anybody have any final questions or thoughts before I finish up with this?
Did anyone know this existed?
Did anybody not know this was a possible solution?
Where do you see this 5, 10 years from
I'm sorry, say that again?
now? Where do you see the whole concept of cloud virtualization 5, 10 years from now?
Well, it depends. When you're talking about cloud native applications, the answer's there, where it's going. How much adoption it's going to have true cloud native as opposed to virtual adoption up there, I think that really depends on how much people are willing to continue to spend. We're already seeing a pullback, and Gartner said that we're at the end of chapter 1 and starting chapter 2. And I think what they're trying to indicate is that we're gonna make a shift. We're learning a lot. That repatriation is really happening. That spend that's year over year, at some point, the guys who made the decision and the board or whatever have to go, why are we doing that? What's the answer? And make adjustments. So I think this is going to be around for some time. Think about what it takes to get every application functioning in a true cloud native format. And if you know where things are today, we're a long ways from being there. So there's going to become a balance. It's going to continue to shift. But right now, the rate at which it's shifting is slowed down a lot. And it's even shown by how those organizations have been laying off some people. They're still growing, don't get me wrong. If you look at the numbers, you can see, Jim, they're growing like crazy. Yes, they are, but they hired a lot of people for bigger growth that's not as fast as it used to be right now. So I don't have a crystal ball, but here it comes.
So when this concept came around, one of the main concerns was trust. Is that still a concern, or is that still an issue?
Mostly with the individuals and the teams that we're working with, because we have higher levels of compliance and attestations than most people. We're running energy companies, health companies, finance companies. So we've got it locked down, and we can demonstrate that. And the big thing is, how are we integrating with the other systems, making sure that's working? Because great, we have this house locked down, but it's a multi-cloud world. So how do we make sure we're helping you out with that? And microsegmentation and some other things that we offer help out with that. So I'll go through this quickly. Briefing sessions, if you want to talk with us, we can do. The workshops I talked about, that's where, hey, we've shown you how you can do DR or cloud or microsegmentation, but it's like, is this really right for our business? We want to get a bunch of people in the room, your thought leaders, our thought leaders, and have a really good conversation. I get the sponsors involved in this from your organization and get your influencers giving me information before we go into a workshop. These are really powerful. Of course, we do no fee assessments, but this doesn't mean you can call me up and I'll come down tomorrow and do an assessment for your desktops. It means we've been talking, we're talking with your sponsors, we understand what you're trying to do for the business, because I've done these assessments for many years, anywhere from $15,000 to $150,000. I'm telling you, what we're providing is in the tens of thousands of dollars if you were to just hire a consulting company. That's the kind of work that we do. But we do it because we've been talking, okay? And these are really valuable. It doesn't mean you have to buy from us, final note, but we'd love it if you did. Golfing, skeeting, fishing, we take people out to racetracks to drive around the BMWs and Porsches. So there's lots of ways to connect with us. Of course, we have people in most markets with 15 data centers across the country to just have a cup of coffee or dinner or lunch. So I want to thank everybody for spending your time in this room. Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm not even trying to answer this question. Would you be interested in doing an assessment help us understand what is it that we need to do. I mean, we don't, I think we're struggling with the end game.
Yep.
All right, we don't want to start going in this direction and find out we should have went that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think, in my mind, in my opinion, that would be probably a good step for us to get some. But here's the problem: you call a service provider, and they're gonna. I think it was your first 2 slides. Oh yeah, kumbaya, we can do all that, and everything else. You know, just sign the dotted line. We'll convert you. And I don't. So we don't do that because of that, because we feel like it's going to be their solution or no solution. We're looking for an unbiased.
So the take there, Nick, is this, is if you go to Cognizant, they're going to tell you that everything belongs in Amazon all the time. And they're going to show you, hey, this is how much it's going to cost. Unfortunately, it's 2.5 times that. Okay?
Right.
So if we, because we're not Amazon, right?
Right.
If we do that, we lose all credibility in the market. So we go in and we measure application by application. This belongs in Amazon or Azure. This belongs in-house. This could go with us.
And that's what I think we
Right.
need. And also then the second part to that, whereas if we were to buy into this solution, what, when, how much, where?
Yeah, no, I'm going to come over and we're going to continue the conversation. If anybody else doesn't have any questions, we'll let the room go and let's talk for a minute. Does that work?
No, I'm sorry, I thought that was just.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I wasn't looking for.
No, it'll only take a second. Yep. Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.